So my standard spiel when starting this program is that gardening is an exercise in failure. You will probably kill a lot of plants, especially if this is your first, your first few years growing, and that's okay. I'm here to tell you to not take it personally. Embrace. It's an opportunity to learn to embrace failure as a learning opportunity. Um, just I recommend that you keep good notes and try to do better next year. It does get easier. I think around year 5 is really when you'll probably hit your stride gardening. So just keep that in mind if you're at the very beginning of this journey. You just got to keep at it. I'm in year 12 of gardening. I still kill plenty of plants. I'm still learning. I do grow a lot of more food than I did my first year. So it does get better. All kinds of terrible things are going to happen. The weather's not going to cooperate, diseases and pests and rabbits and deer and who knows. So just keep that in mind. Keep going. Don't give up. And you will gradually learn how to be an awesome gardener, I promise. Okay, so in this workshop, we are going to talk a little bit about site selection, what you can do to prepare your garden for tilling, how to prepare your garden beds after they've been tilled, and then we'll get into the meat of garden planning and drawing a garden map. So that's what we're going to be going. Hopefully I'm going to try to get through all this in a timely manner, but if I'm talking too fast, let me know. I'll try to slow down a little bit.
And if you have any questions, just put them in the chat and I can either respond or I'll let Lexi know. So.
Yes. Okay. Site selection for a garden. If you don't already have an existing spot, I'm just going to say chances are you don't have an ideal location for a garden. Very few people do. And you're just going to have to do the best with the location that you have and try to pick out the best spot in your yard, taking in consideration all of the factors I'm about to talk about for this. So you want a relatively flat area. If you have if you're on a hillside, you have to be more careful about gardening because if you're not, all of your soil will just wash down after the first rain when you till. So you want to try to find the flattest spot in your yard, but not the spot that's down in a swamp or anything. So there is kind of a feedback or a trade-off on that. You want at least 8 hours of sunlight. There are some things that'll do fine with between 6 and 8 hours of sunlight, but things like tomatoes and peppers are really going to struggle if you have a spot that has less than 8 hours of sunlight. Morning light is better than afternoon light, but if all you have is afternoon light, then as long as you have at least 8 hours, you'll do okay. But in the direct sun in the morning is nice because it dries your plant leaves off, and that can help go a long way in preventing disease in your garden. And some afternoon shade is fine too, because it gets really hot, and so afternoon shade will help keep things a little cooler, and you won't have to water as much. So that's the ideal situation. I mean, my garden doesn't really get sun until about 9:30, 10 a.m. So and I get a lot of afternoon light. So you really have to do it the best you can. You want it to be near a water source. You really don't want it located, at the back of your property up a big hill. A garden needs about 400 gallons of water each week, and if that's not provided by the sky, then then you're going to have to cart that up there somehow, and I doubt you're going to carry 5-gallon buckets, enough 5-gallon buckets to actually water your garden. So having it relatively near a water source is important. You want to make sure that you have enough topsoil to grow something, so that if you take a shovel and go around the spot that you want, that you're not hitting a lot of things like tree roots or rocks or hard pan or whatever. You want at least a good foot of of soil before you hit something. And then if you have a lot of moss, then that's not a good sign. That means you have a lot of shade. You're probably not getting 8 hours of sunlight. Moss indicates highly acidic soil and also poor drainage. So you want to avoid spots with moss. You really want to avoid having your garden in a flood zone. First off, because that can kill things if you get a heavy rainfall, but also flooding can deposit heavy metals and other nasty stuff into your soil, which your plants will then uptake. So you really want to avoid anywhere that may have the hint of flooding. And then you also, even if we have a heavy rainfall, like it's supposed to rain a bunch, in the next few weeks. So just check and make sure that you're not putting your garden somewhere that's really boggy and doesn't drain well after a rain. And then you want to avoid putting your garden on top of your septic drain field. If you rent your house or you're not sure, check that out and make sure that you're avoiding that location. Because your grass may be quite lush in that location, but it's not a good spot for your vegetable garden.
I
So
have a couple questions.
what do we got?
Okay, Carissa says they've recently moved their garden and now has full sun. Will this be harmful to plants, or will they enjoy soaking up all the sun?
Most of your summer crops are really gonna love it. You may get some issues with sun scald, especially on peppers. You're just gonna have to see. And if you do notice some issues with it, you can install shade cloth. Or you can strategically use tall plants like corn to make sure that you're shading plants like lettuce or brassicas that don't like really intense afternoon sun. So there are ways to kind of mitigate it, but for the most part, having zero shade is just going to be good for your garden.
And then the other question was, what are your thoughts about double dug gardens versus raised beds for the type of soil here?
If you want to double dig your garden, go for it. I've never done it because I am kind of lazy, I guess. I'm not going to put that kind of effort in. Double dig is where you're just, instead of tilling, you're going in with a special instrument called a broad fork, and really just kind of and a shovel, and you're just getting in. You're tilling with your hands, basically. At least that's what I think they're referencing. And so it's a lot of work. And if I will talk a lot about converting to no-till in the fall. However, if you want to start gardening in the spring and you haven't prepared in a no-till in the fall, you're going to probably have to till in the spring if you want to garden. Because setting up a no-till situation, and I will talk way more about this in the fall, takes about 6 months to prepare if you're not going to initially till. And while tilling does cause some damage to your soil, as long as you minimize tilling as much as possible, it's something you can repair. And raised beds, if you want to raise beds, so with wooden structures, if you want to put in a wooden raised bed, that's fine. I estimate that it costs between $50 and $75 per raised bed in order to build. And that includes the wood and the topsoil and the compost and everything. So it's very expensive to construct raised beds. They are nice to have, but not everyone can afford it. And certainly most people, and I will talk a lot about soil health during this. So even if you're starting with East Tennessee's worst red clay, if you are diligent about it, over a period of 3 or 4 years, you're going to turn that clay into very nice friable soil. So we provide you resources for an in-earth garden, a tilled garden in this program. If you want to build your own raised beds, you're totally welcome to do that. And I've definitely gardened in raised beds before, and they're great, but we're going to talk mainly about in-earth gardens and how to do the best with East Tennessee soil. So I think that's the last of our questions for this moment. So we're going to keep going. on this, and feel free to type more questions in and I will stop periodically and get to them. All right, will you let me? There we go. Okay, so continuing with our site selection, yeah, oops. Don't place your garden near trees. You don't want to be under, if the branches, you don't want your garden under the reach of a tree. You want to have it far away, because the roots of a tree will reach at least to the tips of the branches, if not a little further. Trees are very greedy. They will take all the water and nutrients from your garden, so you don't want them near as best you can. And then, as you especially don't want your garden near any walnuts. Walnuts produce a toxin in their roots, and actually all parts of the plant, the leaves too, will contain this toxin, and some plants are immune to it, and others, like tomatoes and peppers, are very susceptible to it, and if they grow at all, they will be very stunted. So you definitely want to locate your garden away from trees, and especially away from walnut trees. There are some native plants that grow fine under walnuts, and you can Google that if you have a walnut and want to plant under it. There's plenty of things that'll grow under walnuts, but not a lot of vegetables. So here's the picture. So no-till takes about 6 months, and really it's all about just basically creating a compost pile over top of your garden with lots of nice materials like straw, hay, shredded leaves, grass clippings, wood chips, whatever, and you pile that on in the fall, and you let it rot down for 6 months, and you have a really nice spot for a no-till garden. But there's not really time right now to do that, but you can still smother your grass with a tarp. And actually, I would ask you all if you have tarps or cardboard, or someone last year used a pool, like an empty pool casing or whatever, and that's what she smothered her grass with. So it's whatever you have on hand. Start killing your grass, so that when we get the tiller out to your place, then we won't have to fight with the grass, and it'll already be on its way out. And if you want under this tarp, you can certainly add compost, well-rotted manure, other stuff that'll start rotting down. And I will say about manure, there's some issues. If it's not coming from your own animals, then you need to ask the farmer if they're spraying anything on their hay fields, because there are these persistent herbicides that will actually pass through the digestive system of the animals eating the hay, and it'll be in their manure, and these chemicals are so persistent that they will remain there for 3 to 5 years. And so if you apply that to your garden, you've essentially created an area that's going to kill plants for 3 to 5 years after that. So if you're unsure about your manure source, then test it on a potted plant or something, just to make sure that it doesn't have these persistent herbicides in it. And so the farmer may not be spraying anything on their fields, but they may then be buying hay from another farmer, and that farmer may be spraying. So you just really have to be careful these days with manure. Composted, made from vegetable scraps or leaves or wood chips or whatever, is generally safe, at least from these persistent herbicides. So just keep that in mind. But it is nice to lay something under the tarp and let it start rotting down on your soil. I do recommend that folks get soil tests. Unfortunately, we don't have enough funding to cover everyone for a soil test this year. However, if you would like a soil test and you can't afford it, it's about $20 from UT Extension. Then feel free to holler at us, and we'll try to cover folks if we can. So this website, if you just Google soil tests in Tennessee, this website should pop up from UT, University of Tennessee, and you can just navigate through and find out information. Or you can also visit or probably call, I don't know if the offices are open, call your local county extension agent and get information about how to submit a soil test. So you need to take 8 to 10 samples from your garden area. You want them about 6 inches deep, and you want to mix all these different samples together, let it dry out for a few days. You don't want to mailing wet dirt to the soil lab. And then you'll have to get the extension office can give you a little test pack that you fold together and put your soil in and package it up. And there's instructions for mailing it, or you can drop it back off at your extension office and they will mail it out for you. And like I said, it's about $20 to get that test done. And if you get your test results in and you have no idea what they mean, you can email them to me and I would be happy to interpret them for you. A lot of times they are sent to you in conventional recommendations and I can help interpret them into organic recommendations for you. So, and then again, if you need a soil test and you can't swing the $20, just holler. It's no problem. I just can't do it for everyone in the program because there's 50 of you. All right. Any quick questions?
Will you be discussing how to best compost?
No, I am not a fan of home composting. It's just really hard to get it to the right temperature. And so if you aren't composting correctly, then and you're putting like waste from your garden in there, there's a good chance that you're just spreading disease around. So, but Joe Hoffman, who runs Hoffman Composting in town, is also a really good source for home composting. So, and a lot of the extension agents will run classes on how to make compost, but I'm not personally a fan, and I'm sorry about that. Rabbit manure, generally, I think rabbit manure, well, with any kind of manure, you probably want to let it sit for 3 or 4 months just to let it not be so fresh. Although I think rabbit manure is one of the better ones in terms of not burning your plants if you use it sooner. And chicken manure, definitely, chicken manure is very hot. It means it's very high in nitrogen. So it has to be mixed probably with wood chips or hay or straw or something. And then, yeah, you need to let it sit probably for 6 months or a year just to let it, let that nitrogen kind of cook out of it. Otherwise you run the risk of burning your plants with too much nitrogen. I have trees all around my yard, but I'm determined to grow. I should say that if you are really concerned about finding the right spot for your garden, holler at me. Either I can try looking on Google Maps, or worst case can come out to your yard and try to help you locate the best spot for your garden if it's not totally obvious to you. How do we figure out where the septic tank is? Do you know if you have a septic tank or not? Because if you're in the city, you probably are on city sewer. We can have a longer discussion about how to locate your septic tank though.
Yeah, I'm just one street over from city. So the
Oh, you're
houses behind me have city sewer and
okay.
I'm on a septic tank.
Okay, so you know that.
I know that for sure, but I have no idea how to figure out where it's at. We have a yard in the front and a yard in the back, and we just moved here, so I don't know.
Okay.
But we can talk about that later.
Yeah. Generally, you should be able to find a hump somewhere at the back of the house, usually, or downhill. It's usually downhill from the house if it's possible. So
Everything's so
usually
flat.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
We can poke around maybe. But yeah, email me or Rosie if you want help finding the right spot or that kind of thing. I'm happy to come out. Okay. So once you've tilled, then I want you to raise up your soil a little bit. So we're not talking about raised beds with wood, but this is referred to as a raised bed style of gardening. But basically you're creating a permanent planting area and a permanent walking area, and you are not going to walk on the planting area. I'm going to harp on that a lot. Nothing hurts me more than to watch people walk on planting areas because it causes soil compaction. Ideally, you want your rows to run east to west. That is the best in terms of getting sunlight to your plants. But if you are on any kind of slope, and I mean any kind of slope, then you need to orient your slope or your rows along the slope. Okay, so mine garden actually runs, this is a picture of my garden, actually runs north, almost perfectly north to south, because it is along the hillside. Okay. So, and that basically will help prevent erosion. So if your rows are running up and down the hill, then as soon as it rains and after you've tilled, all of your soil is just going to wash to the bottom of the hill. So you want to prevent that by running your rows along the side of the hill, or with the side of the hill. This is kind of a little diagram of sunlight, so you can kind of see north, south, east, west, what it looks like, you know, why you want that east to west orientation on your rows. Nope, what's going on? Okay. All right, as I said, and you can kind of see in this picture too, what I'm talking about, raising up your rows. So basically digging out a pathway. And I know I said I was kind of lazy and don't like digging in the garden, but this actually wasn't that hard. Right after you till, you can't see it, but there are sticks marking out the row. And if you want to get really fancy, you can run string between both ends of the garden, so you can get a nice straight row. But I think I did a pretty decent job eyeballing this one. But basically, you want your planting beds to be anywhere from 2 to 4 feet wide. And you want your walking areas to be anywhere from, that really could be 1 to 2 feet wide. It just depends on what you're comfortable with. If you feel like you need to be able to sit or kneel in your garden, then you probably want to go with about 2 feet in your pathways. And if you are young and dexterous, then you can go with a narrower pathway and fit in more planting beds in your garden. It's really up to you. Like I said, mark your beds out with stakes and string so that they're straight, and then dig out your walking areas and pile that soil into your planting areas. And then if you want, you can add compost to the planting beds if you didn't do that before tilling. And then, like I said, do your absolute best not to ever step in your planting beds. Just walk on the walking areas. And this is going to go a long way towards helping to prevent soil compaction, which is a problem here in East Tennessee with our clay soils. They get compacted really easily. So here's what I'm talking about, kind of the finished product, are these kind of hilled up beds with a pathway in the middle. And you can kind of see it also in this other picture. And then you can see another example of them using a tarp. This is a random picture I stole off the internet, a tarp to smother plants. Okay, I'm going to answer some questions, and if people need to take a quick break, use the bathroom, get some water or whatever, please take that opportunity. And I'll resume slides at 7:06, and then I will just answer questions here. Okay, I think these are answering the septic tank thing. Sometimes the area looks a little lower than the rest of the yard, like a sunken area, or like Lexi said, a raised area. So the sunken area is probably the drainage lines, and then the raised area, like my house is on city sewer, but I can see where my septic tank is because there's still it's still buried under the porch in the back of my house. So there's kind of a hump there. And some weird plastic things sticking up that I guess are access points. And then you can contact your health department for a map of your septic field. That's super helpful. Okay, septic pump companies can help. Digging swales on hillsides. Yep, permaculture is a swale thing. And that can help with water retention too. How do we till the soil? So if you need, we will have at some point, we'll email out a tilling sign-up sheet. We have a fairly big walk behind, they're called a walk behind tractor. So it's somewhere between a very large tiller and a very small tractor. It's a kind of a beast of a machine. And we have a guy that will bring it around and till. So if you don't have access to a tiller or a neighbor or whatever, we are happy to bring the tiller out and till your soil. So we'll send that sheet around, or that sign up sheet around at some point soon. And then again, we only have the one machine and we're highly dependent on weather. It has to be dry enough to till. Which usually takes 3 or 4 days for the soil to dry out enough in order for us to till. So if we have a really wet, rainy spring, you know, it may take us a while to get to everyone who needs tilling. So I just ask that folks be patient and hopefully we will get tilling done in a timely manner. Yes. Okay. Do I purchase compost? I recommend Hoffman composting if you want to get compost in bulk, and he delivers too, which is nice if you don't have a truck. Sometimes you can go to like a Home Depot or Walmart or something, and if they have torn or ripped bags of compost, they'll sell it to you for very cheap. So you can kind of keep an eye on the bagged stuff if you want, but it's much cheaper usually to just buy it in bulk. And either with your truck or get it delivered. Does the soil here in the Johnson City area need much amending? Yes, we have in general very crappy soil. I'm sorry for everyone. It's your first year. Hoffman, it's Hoffman. Hoffman's, yeah.
Joe Hoffman.
Oh, someone just posted the link. Great.
Perfect. Thanks.
He has pretty good stuff. And he has a bunch of different grades of compost. And he also has a compost, like you can sign up to provide your food scraps in a bucket on your front porch. And he comes every week and picks it up and composts it. And then you get discounts on when you purchase compost from him. So I think he's the only like local composting company in the area, which is why I'm not really plugging him. I'm just giving you information on that. Although I am a part of his food scraps program. So yeah, but you don't necessarily have to use compost. It's good. Compost is great, but it can be a little pricey. So we will be talking probably in most other workshops about ways to improve soil health through your practices, through mulching with straw or leaves or grass clippings or whatever, and then using cover crops. So you are not necessarily, you don't necessarily need to purchase compost if you don't want to. How much square footage? So I don't want you to take on too much with your garden, especially if it's your first year. If it's your first year growing, please don't put in a 50 by 50 garden. I think probably for a family of 4, like a 25 by 25 is probably more than adequate. If you are a little nervous about taking on something even that size, probably minimum 10 by 15 will get you good results. But yeah, it's really going to be a personal decision how much garden you want to take on. And we're going to talk a little bit about crop planning and deciding how much you want to grow. So you can kind of see, depending on what you want to grow and how much of it you want to grow, how big then your space is going to need to be in order to accommodate all.
Also, the seeds are, you get quite a few seeds in each pack. Like it's ample, so it's not.
Yeah, and you will order what you want from us. So we're not giving you some kind of standard package of seeds. You get to order what you want, and then we do our best to accommodate that depending on our supply. So yes, if you so we'll try to give you as much heads up about the tilling as possible. So you should, if you're not there, and I would recommend that you be there, that's probably best. But if for some reason you can't be there when he comes to till, then you want to mark out your area with sticks or flags or something, or better yet, cover it with tarps so you start killing the grass. Will you be able to save seeds from these plants? Some of them, Kitty, some of them will be open pollinated and savable, and some of them won't. And really most of the hybrids are squash and cucumbers and that kind of thing, because they're so prone to dying that I've purchased the most disease resistant seeds I could find, which are usually hybrids. So if you have any questions about what you can save, just holler at me and I can tell you what varieties are seed saving. And I can talk a little bit about that probably in the fall too, if we want to, if there's enough people interested, we can organize another little workshop for it.